And something a little different, Paris to Dakar and back to Paris. (1994), Paris would be both the beginning and the end of the Dakar Rally. The boomerang edition, if you like. It all began in rather unfamiliar conditions. Stage 1 in Bordeaux was a mud bath so deep that the bikes weren't even allowed to attempt the stage. The cars, from the factory's professionals to the lowliest privateer, entered the struggle in the French quagmire. At least one driver was having fun in the mud, though. Claude Arnault beat the factory drivers at their own game on a disappearing track. And for the second time, the Parisian won a Dakar stage, having previously won in similar conditions a few years before. A wet mud specialist on the Dakar. Who'd have believed it? Well, stage 2 was a military base outside of Granada, and the bikes began their rally with home hero José Luis Suri taking the stage win over the more illustrious countryman Georgi Arcarons. It was 4 Spaniards in the top 5, and KTM lodged their second stage win after having taken the prologue with Heinz Kindergartner. Well, stage 3 also departed from Granada, but had the feel more of a World Rally stage than a leg of the Dakar. It was also the opening salvo in the battle between Citroën and Mitsubishi. Well, early leader and from Bordeaux, Claude Arnault. Well, he knew he'd done well to profit from the conditions, but his lead didn't last long. The order changed. After Granada, Pierre Lartigue and Michel Perrin led in their ZX, Bruno Sabi and Dominique Serriès second in the Mitsubishi. Well, it may not have been sand dunes, but some of the Spanish terrain was just as insurmountable as the great desert obstacles. It was causing problems out there, even for the rangy. Well, New Year's Eve at the end of 1993 and the end of Bruno Sabi's title as reigning winner of the Dakar. More than that, the end of his hopes of retaining it in the Dakar after hitting a huge hole in the first stage in Morocco, ripping his front right wheel and suspension clean off. Well, fortunately, the service truck arrived and the car was repaired, but any chances of Sabi had of winning it were over. Thank you all once again, he says, rather deflatedly. Well, the rally would continue for Sabi, but he'd now become a rescue truck for the other 3 Pajeros. He sat 4 hours behind in 180th place. Well, for the rest of the contingent, it was a relatively smooth sailing over the next 3 days. At the front of the field, the Mediterranean Alliance was beginning to set a rhythm, led by the dominant Italian and the Kedjivas, of course. The Italian Kedjivas ridden by a Spaniard. Stage 6 going to Gallardo, his first of the Dakar, and the lead going to Arcarons ahead of Mas. Well, Lartigue was beginning to look invincible. The Mitsubishi's barely able to keep up. Engine problems affected both Weber and Shinazuka, with the turbo slowing Fontenay by 1.5 hours. On an incredibly fast stage from Dakhla to Nouhadibou, Kedjivit also broke records. 7 of them filled the first 7 places overall. Orioli, the stage winner, and now 3rd overall, less than a minute behind Arcarons. Well, another long, fast stage was stage 8, meant the cars and the bikes could really stretch their legs before heading for the dunes. Nouhadibou to Nouakchott, dramatic as ever. Free running, open countryside, some great competition. Finally, the Dakar looked like a Dakar. Well, despite the records and the stage times, it all paled into insignificance on the 5th of January when a doyen of the Dakar, Michel Sanson, was found dead at the end of that day's stage at the edge of Nouakchott, a victim, once again, of his passion for adventure. To Dakar from Nouakchott, 2 stages of beach racing. The final day of heading south, another day that inspired some great riding from Oscar Gallardo, won the 2nd special, 30 kilometres in the spray of the Atlantic to the Lac Rose, the traditional finish of the Dakar, but this year only the turnaround point. Carlos Mas was fastest on the opening morning stage. Well, that stage into Dakar cost Owen Weber dear. Stranded with a seized engine, the German lost 90 minutes in spite of enlisting Sabi's help, giving yet more time away to the 2 Citroens. By Dakar, Weber was relegated to 5th. How long would this battle between Citroën and Mitsubishi last? Well, it was just the turnaround. We were heading back towards Paris. So quickly it was to Dakar, the halfway stage. Just how fast they'd get back to Paris still remained a mystery. Lots of traps out there, as ever. So the blast down the beach, not a celebration of the end, but a celebration of the road back home. So nobody taking it easy because stage times still counted an awful lot. There was a lot of racing going on out there. This wasn't the end. So a serious day down the beach, heading to the Lac Rose, and then the turnaround. You'll be able to find out how they got on after this break. We'll be back with more. Dakar had been and gone, but come the rally, come the low. of January, and Weber crashed heavily. He was safe but shaken. Not so lucky, he hit whilst trying to repair Weber's car was Mitsubishi truck mechanic Jean-Paul Bozenet, suffering head and neck injuries. Well, Weber walked away from the wreck, which happened just a day into the second half of the rally, but his Pajero was a mess. After barrel rolling 6 times over the sand, he was angry and just went out there and drove like a madman. Cursing his luck, but not being sensible with it. Well, that evening at the bivouac, At booty limit, the boss of Mitsubishi, Ulrich Bremer, tried to calm Webber down. Thinking there was a fault with the car, he ordered Webber to retire. Probably the sensible idea in the circumstances. He just wasn't with it. Well, ahead, Lartigue was fastest again, stretching his lead to 1 hour and 3 minutes over Shinazuka and over 1 hour 30 over Oriol, his teammate. But for once Lartigue regretted his win, his 6th stage win. It meant that the next morning he'd be first into the Sahara for the appointment with the dunes. The 9th of January at Artu, Nouhadibou, 648 kilometers. The day to beat all days on the Paris-Dakar-Paris. On the map and from the sky, a sandscape of immense beauty interspersed with gorges and canyons. But within hours, the going got harder and harder, and it was to get softer and softer. Fash fash, they call it. Sand as soft as talcum powder. 28 kilometers of dead dunes. It turned out to be a farce waiting to happen. All the superstars got stuck. Orioli, Mas, Akerons, Mioni. We're not in a competition, said Akerons. This is just playing in the sand. Well, the riders grouped together for assistance and even the race director got involved, but to little avail, as brief passages of action invariably ended with getting stuck once more. It was just too hard, and the race for the bikes was sensibly neutralised. Moments later, Carlos Mas broke his chain on his bike, his hopes blown away in the wind. He had some tears which quickly evaporated in the desert air, as they do. For everyone left in, the stage continued. The problem was that with no tracks apparent, the desert had been blown clean. Navigators had to wade through the dunes, find a piece of hard ground, hard enough to take a vehicle, and then you're able to drive on. Literally miles from the rest of the field, the Mitsubishis threw everything into the final battle, the last long stage of the rally. So Mitsubishi were battling on. The Citroens had left the course. They were not at the checkpoint. It's crazy, he said, absolutely crazy. We have to keep going now, it's our only chance. And it was their only chance. The Citroens decided to head south to avoid the walls of sand, the sand that was facing the Mitsubishis. Said was useless in the dunes anyway. Two races on very different courses were starting to reveal themselves. So there are two cars from each team, and they're still out there. What on earth do you think you're doing? Coming out of the dunes, he was Fenouil telling them off, effectively, wanting them to go back out there. It's a bit like poker, you've got to fight for it. They weren't in any mood to continue out there. It's your responsibility, Fenouil, said Oriol. It's your responsibility as well, said the race director. And then the argument begins. You didn't even send out the openers. The pathfinders yesterday, we saw them in Attar. You weren't cutting a course for us. There was nothing to follow. The rules, it says there must be pathfinders. You are a liar. Wow, that's the race director they're talking to. Citroëns had had it. They weren't going to play in the desert anymore under these conditions. The argument went on long and hard.
T'as vu le film aussi? Je vous avais dit qu'il fallait là-dedans pelleter. Il faut mettre les ouvreurs. Allez, on y va.
So they cut out. They decided not to do the dunes and take their penalty as it came. The Citroëns returned to the bivouac hours after nightfall, deliberately missing the final checkpoint and so risking penalties. The Italian Giacometti in his Nissan decided to follow them. Uncertainty then hanging over the rally. See how it was resolved after this break. The four Mitsubishi's only chance of winning the rally was just to keep going in the stage, head for the checkpoint and hope that the Citroëns were heavily penalised. At this point, they'd been in the stage for 25 hours, their determination undented by fatigue. All night, Sirius and Masmara, the navigators, have been running all night. Sabi and Fontenay had followed them inch by inch over the dunes. Dunes bigger than El Wad, harder than El Galea, tougher than the Niger Pass, part of the eternal hell which was this Dakar. Unrelenting, the four ignored the rest of the rally, which was already disappearing fast into the distance, in a slim hope that all might win them the rally. Obstinate, they never gave up, even when they couldn't see their goal. Alone they were, out there in the unknown. It was their only chance, they thought. Finish the stage, we'll be the only ones. And maybe, that's our way of winning it. We'll be the only ones to have done exactly that. Bruno Sabi directing in the dunes. Wow. Are you cold, is the question? No, we've been sweating a lot, actually. We must have dug ourselves out 200 times throughout the night. It's all crazy, completely mad. Mind you, time has flown by. I only looked at my watch once, and that was at 4:30 in the morning. I hope this is all worth something. I hope that we get something back from all this effort, he says.
On n'a pas vu. On a quitté à 9h du soir, on a regardé l'heure à 9h. À 4h30, on a dit punaise, merde, on n'aura pas le CP à l'heure. Mais j'espère qu'on sera récompensé parce que.
I do hope it's been worth it. Well, the two Mitsubishis got on. Even out of time control 8. KM 376 had been closed by Fenouil, the race directors. The drivers heard the bad news very late, and the stewards had decided to end the stage 130 kilometres back at checkpoint 5. It had all been for nothing. 40 hours of pain, a slim chance of success for nothing. Mitsubishi, well, I can tell you, they decided to retire. They said it was just too unfair, they'd given too much. You had to congratulate them, though. They were the only ones to complete that stage, a stage which had basically been nullified behind them. I'm just glad to finish, he said. We're always going forward, even during the night. Tremendous. Team Mitsubishi are retiring from the rally because we don't have time to repair the cars before the next stage. They still have 600 kilometers to go before they can join the rest of the rally, which is out ahead of us because they pulled out of this stage, and it would put lives and the security of my drivers at too much risk. So as a result, we've decided to withdraw. With Mitsubishi out of the competition for the bikes, it all started again, crossing the border back into Morocco without Carlos Mas, but with Jordi Acaron's biting at the heels of Eddie Orioli like never before. The Catalan winner of the special clawed back more than 3 minutes from the Italian in the overall standings. The bike race then still very much on, feeling that something had happened to the car race really, and it wasn't really a race anymore. A day later, from Bur and Zarani to Tantan, the two rivals didn't let each other out of their sight for 600 kilometers. But Orioli was the winner that time, adding a little to his lead, now 3 minutes and 40 ahead of Acaron's. Garda's beginner's luck ran out in Morocco, crashing at almost 100 miles per hour, and then incredibly able to keep going to the finish, but the damage was too bad to restart the next day. And restart we did, running better than ever, the two Citroens. Well, they hadn't been stressed in the desert, had they? Hubert Auriol and Pierre Lartigue. This time Auriol was fastest into Tantan ahead of Lartigue, but taking it in turns. The next day it was Lartigue first to Ouazzazate. Not even close enough to be in the Citroen's dust clouds. Philippe Van Berg in his two-wheel drive diesel buggy, third by 2 hours from the Japanese Masuoka in the Mitsubishi, the only one left in the top 10. And the final member of the top 5, Carol Laprace in his 19-litre Tatra in a do-or-die duel with Germanetti's Nissan, in the overall, that is. The dunes thankfully behind those that remained. The run for home was on. Still plenty of danger out there though. And out in a ball of flame after running high up the order, the Russians Elizarov and Vinokurov in their Lada. On the bikes, the battle between Acaron's and Orioli intensified by the minute towards the final stages in Morocco. On the track into Ouazzazate, the Italian stretched his lead by 41 seconds, only to lose a minute and a half the following day into Melilla on the Mediterranean coast. And with just 2 minutes and 57 seconds between the two, and just 2 days and 3 stages before the finish, there was an awful lot to play for. Orioli had led since Senegal, but Acaron's is back on home ground in Spain, on a stage he knows like the back of his hand. Whatever happened, his name had already been branded into the history books of the Dakar like no other Spaniard. While retiring in quick succession, Thierry Manlialdi, Laurence Charbonnel and Jean-Christophe Vanier. And with them, the dreams of a French victory. The only compensation, Patrick Siriol, leading the marathon class and 5th overall on his 8th Dakar. One-time biker and now a driver, Jerome Rivière, seized the moment to win the last African stage between Ouazzazate and Melilla. Rivière had almost dropped out of the rally on the first day. Now he's passing the Citroens, breaking their stranglehold and giving the Duck Z team their first win on the Dakar. Euphoria in the Duck Z camp then, turning to ecstasy when Philippe Van Berg came in second. it really felt like the job was just to get them home now. Well, head-to-head, Orioli and Akerons maintained their battle to the end of a rally many said would be over by now. The feeling of suspense heightened by the bank of fog hanging over the two stages near Granada. Well, stage one, 65 kilometres between the olive trees, 65 kilometres to put the result beyond doubt. Akerons had no option but to hope for a miracle, or indeed pull off a stunt that would win him the rally. He chose the latter. Driving between the olive trees, he took a shortcut, not exactly legal, but not illegal at that point either. But in their last duel in the Faroes Rally in 1993, Akerons lost the lead in the last few kilometres within sight of the pyramids. No pyramids this time, but Akerons learnt that anything is possible. Well, possible enough to cut Orioli's lead down to 1 minute 15 seconds, a gap small enough to narrow on the penultimate stage, just 4 kilometres long at a military base near Granada. And there was more reasons for Akerons to push. Orioli saying the same thing happened to Magnaldi, and now it's happened to me. I can't believe it. I've broken my chain, but luckily I've managed to do all of the special with it the way it is. Just got through. Well, luck swings like a pendulum, and just when Akerons needed it most, his accelerator cable snapped and the gap inched apart to 1 minute 47 with one stage remaining. I lost some time, he says, but what can you do? Oriol and the Citroens, they much prefer the wet to that sand. It was a wise decision by them, pulling out of an impossible stage, and they were heading for victory. They were both going for it. It was full, on the edge stuff. Across it was that went first and won the stage. Then all he could do was wait and see if luck had dealt Orioli a bad hand. Orioli, though, is a professional, determined that luck would play no part. He took it easy, giving up just 30 seconds of his precious lead, but not the lead itself. At the wire, just 1 minute and 13 seconds split the pair after 3 weeks on the road. It was the longest 42 kilometres of my career, said Orioli. I was watching the odometer count out 20, 25, wanting it to be 40, and I just kept the revs down, nothing above 4,000. And when I saw the house near the finish and the man saying it was okay, I slowed down a bit and brought it in. There was never much doubt about the Citroen's. Lartigue even let Oriol win the final stage, but the victory in the Dakar, Lartigue, first on the Classic, finally came his way. At last I could smile, he said. We had some problems, but we still pushed to the maximum, and I'm really happy that we finished with the Dakar and even Paris. A relief to all, but slightly hollow without the Mitsubishis, naturally enough. A place dreams are made of, the podium at Euro Disney. Eddie Orioli, Jordi Acaronce and Fabrizio Meoni. With them, Lartigue and Perrin, winners of the Paris-Moscow-Peking, and now winners of the Paris-Dakar-Paris. Second, Hubert Oriol and Gilles Picard. And third, Van Berg and Cott. And fifth, at 1 point, finally 6 overall. A mammoth Tatra of Carlos Lapres, beating dozens of faster and lighter 4x4s. Paris may have been the end in 1994, but it's Senegal where the Dakar gets its name and where the rally has its heart. And you'll see more of that tomorrow.